Welcome to the Lift Oneself podcast, where we break mental health stigmas through conversations. I'm your host, Nat, and we dive into topics about trauma and how it impacts the nervous system. Yet we don't just leave you there. We share insights and tools of self-care, meditation, and growth that help you be curious about your own biology. Your presence matters. Please like and subscribe to our podcast. Help our community grow. Let's get into this. Oh, and please remember to be kind to yourself. Welcome to the Lift Oneself podcast, Andrea. I'm so thankful you're here with me.
Thank you. I am too. I'm eager to see what we can do together here.
Yes, I'm looking forward to the magic. Will you join me in a meditation?
Absolutely.
And for the listeners listening in, or you may be watching, a lot of times people listen to the podcast while they're driving or running or doing some kind of physical activity. So when I ask to close the eyes, I would ask you not to do that because I want you to stay safe and use your visual concentration. Yet the other prompts you're able to do internally for yourself. You don't always have to keep your eyes closed for this. So Andrea, I'll ask you to close your eyes with me and begin breathing in and out through your nose. And you're going to bring your awareness to watching your breath go in and out through your nose. You're not going to try and control your breath. You're just going to observe it, becoming aware of what sensations and feelings that are going on internally. And as those sensations and feelings rise up, don't push them down, just let them come up. You're safe to feel, you're safe to let go, while still keeping your awareness and focus on your breath. Surrender the need to control, release the need to resist, and just be. Be with your breath. Be in the now. Keeping your awareness on your breath, allowing yourself to drop into your body, into the present moment. Still staying with your breath, dropping more into the body, dropping into the present moment. Now at your own time and at your own pace, while still staying with your breath, I'm going to ask you to gently open your eyes. How's your heart doing?
It's good.
Can you let the listeners know who Andrea is?
Andrea is a spunky lady. She is all about being welcoming to others and sharing her wisdom with others. And I would love to give each and every one of your listeners some hope today as we talk, that they might find some guidance. And I do that through my own personal work as a transformational leadership trainer and coach. And I'm just happy to be here.
So when we spoke before the podcast started recording, we said that we would get into core values. It is a word that's used a lot for transformation and change. Yet I'm sure, as myself, when I started to learn this, there's probably some listeners that are like, okay, core values, what are they and why are they important? And what can they do for me as change? So can you bring us into this dialogue and help to give some knowledge to these listeners?
Sure. The prevalence of talk about core values out there is encouraging on one hand and almost confusing on another. And I think the first place to start is to understand there's a difference between personal core values and organizational core values. Anything that is in an organization is really more along the lines of a mission and a vision, whereas your personal core values are an internal compass. They are the principles and the guiding priorities that are non-negotiables for you, that nobody else has. You might end up with the same core values spoken out loud as someone else, but they are going to show up differently for you and you're going to have a little bit of a different definition of them. So being able to say they are the internal guidelines that allow you to navigate everything that happens in life with your own authority and your own authenticity intact is a really, to me, important way of defining them so that we're starting in the same place. Anything outside of you is something that you value. Your family, your friends, even your spirituality, a lot of times, especially if it's in a structure like a religion, those things are things that we value, whereas our core values are kind of the things that we're just born with. And when we look back on them and the work that I do with people, a lot of times they'll show up and people will say, oh, that's why this as a child. Like for me, my top core value is freedom of thought. It's not just freedom, it's freedom of thought. And when I look back, I understand now why my mother said, you were the quintessential strong willed child. Like, yeah, don't tell me what to think, right? So I think, does that give you a good starting place for how
Of
we can talk about
course.
them? Yeah.
Of course. That's the thing. I think, when people start talking about core values, they think, well, it was everything that was put inside me, not
Mm,
recognizing, okay, well, yes, our family and our culture and, the institutions may place some values in you, yet you get to decide what is going to be that core value, how you want to show up and how you're relating with yourself and listening to that compass. I really appreciate you using the word compass so that people can really start to tap in. Like I have an internal compass, and it's like, yeah, like where
yeah.
do you want to be guided, and what is it that you want to bring forth in your life? Because we can have a lot of dreams, and the buzzword is manifestation right now.
Hmm.
However, in that, you're going to have to take action because you can talk a lot about things, you can dream, and it
Hmm.
feels really ecstatic, yet it's to bring that out into the reality, into the real world with actions.
Mm.
So you mentioned that in our message that it's unburying core values inside you. I want to ask the question, can you create values for yourself, or was it always innate and it's just that you're going to uncover what's inside already?
I think it's the latter. I think it's what's innate in you. It's the non-negotiables. And I even start a lot of times with people saying the fastest way to like get a good jump start on what your core values are is to look back over the last week or month at the things that really angered you and the things that brought you lots of joy. Because the things that are opposite of the things that angered you is probably something that's a non-negotiable. Unless it's something that, like you said, these are things that people have put in us. I call those our ABCs, our assumptions, beliefs, and conditioning.
Mm.
And being able to kind of break that down and say, where did this come from? Where did this, if it's something that somebody else taught me, then I need to look at that as a potential belief. And the difference between beliefs and core values is beliefs are changeable. Beliefs are, I mean, ask anybody who's changed political parties or changed religions. Beliefs are very changeable, whereas your core values really aren't. But what I have discovered, even in my own work, because I started with core values back in like 1995 with Franklin Covey. Are you familiar with
Yeah,
Stephen
yeah,
Covey? I have
yeah.
my 93 or 94 governing values um, laminated with packing tape. That shows that that's something that I started working on long ago. But what I realize is that a lot of times we'll see them on the surface as, because my top one then was just freedom. It was just, I don't want to be controlled by anybody else. I don't want to have a job. But the reality is, as I have grown and gained awareness and learned more about myself, I was able to dig down a little deeper and further clarify, like getting the dross off of gold or taking your butter and clarifying it for a good lobster or a good steak dinner, getting the excess, the water out. And it becomes more and more clear that for me, it was freedom of thought. So I personally believe these are things we uncover, which is why that's the way I talk about them. Anything we decide on, that's we can decide to act on those beliefs or those core values, but those actions need to be fueled by them rather than deciding I'm going to have that as a value, because then it becomes something outside of you automatically.
Mhm. Do you think, because I think sometimes people will see the characteristics of other people and say, well, I want to show up that way. So
Mhm.
is it times that we can mimic other people's values, core values, and like instill it in us? Or does it bring a curiosity of further finding out what's already inside you that you can make it look like that other person that you see externally?
Yeah, I think that it can be both ways. Sometimes we see that in another person and realize it resonates with us. I was a musician growing up, and so it's like as we got ready to get play for the band symphony orchestra, it was like we had to have this tuning fork and we needed to all tune to the same thing. So I think a lot of times when we see someone else acting out in a certain way, we realize that's kind of hitting that same note for us, and we're kind of in that same tuning resonate. We resonate with that very well. But I think on the other hand, the three pieces of my business are know yourself, which is core values, know how to communicate that, which I'm a DISC consultant, which is communication and leadership. And then the third piece is live it out in a way that is beautiful and is gracious. And I call that intentional optimism, which is the name of my business. And so those are the principles and the priorities and the mindsets that help us live out our core values in a way that is honoring to them. And so I think it's a both and. I think it can be sometimes we see that in another person and realize, oh, all my life I've been wondering, and that just resonates with me. And so it can be a great place for that, my favorite word, curiosity, to really start. And I say I have terminal curiosity. So it's like constantly digging deeper. But at the same time, it could be that it's just I just want to show up that way. And that's how business core values work for us, or organizational core values work for us. This is how we want to live out the work that we do, or this is how I want to show up. And there's nothing wrong with that. It might be an extension of your core value, but it's probably not your core value.
Now, for those that curiosity, I use curiosity a lot with my clients because a lot of people have been disconnected from it. So they are not willing to go into the unknown, the uncertainty, and you need
Mhm.
curiosity to go into these spaces without fear freezing you and stopping you from taking those steps.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing you say is with core values, just because you identified it, it does not mean that you're not going to continuously refine that and to
Yeah.
go deeper, to give it more language and more precision of it, being able to really access it. Because, like you said, freedom is such a broad spectrum and it can be in definition of almost everything, where it's like, no, you got to be specific of exactly what that is because the mind will just go all over the place with, well, you want freedom, so let me eating and this and that. And it's like, no, 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 it's
Yeah.
this specific place. So there's always a continuous journey to support those pillars of your core values. So how would that look like long term?
I can give you my example, and then I have a client that I worked with this last year who has also done a really good job with this. For me, I thought my top core values 4 years ago were community, freedom, and authenticity. And authenticity has remained, but freedom has gotten further defined because I realized it wasn't just that I didn't want to be in a corporate job. I mean, I spent 25 years in higher education administration and operations. So, in schools of medicine and research administration, I'm okay with actually following rules. I'm okay with someone else giving me a paycheck. I don't prefer it. I'm now self employed. But part of that was I realized it wasn't so much the need to not be at someone else's beck and call or something. It really had more to do with my thought process. Because when you're in a large institution, they're moving in a specific direction. And as a manager of over 20 people, I needed to move our department in that direction. And sometimes I didn't agree with it. And sometimes I said, no, this does not promote flourishing. This is all about managing the status quo. And I finally had to recognize that. But the other piece that I thought community was my top core value, I realized I created a Facebook group and I had over almost 500 women in there, but it just wasn't meeting my need. And I'm a missionary kid, a pastor's wife. So I have church community, but then I have family. But then I went through a deconstruction process and realized all the stuff that I thought was community was not. And had to kind of reevaluate all that. And it wasn't until a fellow coach looked at me and said, "It sounds like you're describing belonging." And I said, "Oh, yes." And I mean, I still get cold chills thinking about it. And it may get further refined than that, but just walking through that process of critically thinking, looking at my beliefs and conditioning and assumptions helped me to see it wasn't community I wanted. I was using community as an outward expression of that need to belong. And
Mhm.
which is a perfect example of what we just talked about. So my client last year, and when I walk people through an exercise, if they just do a simple download or my course or I coach with them, one of the things they do is they come up with, like, I call it the kitchen sink. It's like all these different words, and then we kind of categorize them. And one of the things she did was she kind of wrote out a mission statement using some of the words that were other key words that seemed really important to her. So it's not just freedom as a word. It's no one tells me what to think. This is how I show up, and I think critically about things. And so being able to take that process deeper, but I don't want to scare anybody to think that you have to go that deep on your first pass. You
No.
don't. You
Yeah.
really don't. This is something that is at your pace. And I'm sure as a coach and working with your clients, you probably use something similar, a phrase similar to this, that we know what we know when we know it. We
Yeah.
have the awareness we have when we have it, and we move at the pace that our awareness allows us to move. But just getting started starts a process. I've not seen anybody that was really interested in personal growth that didn't continue to go deeper. I mean, there
Yeah.
have been some people who have been almost compelled to go through it as a leadership workshop or something like that. They're like, yeah, this is great. But any of my clients that have done it have used it in their boundary setting, their personal relationships, their work, how they align to what they do, whether or not they need to be in that organization. It's an extremely valuable tool to have.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing, because what I help my clients with is really understanding their biology, understanding their nervous system. And the
Mm-hmm.
nervous system, again, is that awareness that if it doesn't have safety, it ain't budging nowhere because it has fear and it's like you
Yeah.
have not disarmed the threat inside. So that's
Yes.
why I start these podcasts too with the meditation to remind people like daily to engage with your internal biology because you may be putting yourself in places where, yeah, I want all this change, yet
Mm-hmm.
you haven't created the safety within your body to say we're okay in going in these uncertainty, these unknown places.
Yeah.
And I love how, like you said, your authenticity has always been there. Because what I teach, my clients and myself, I always have to remind myself you can want to be authentic all you want, yet if there's safety, the nervous system's going to access safety. And so then when you come back and you see, like, I wasn't authentic to myself and this, you have to look at the context. Well, was safety an issue that you
Mhm.
couldn't say certain things or you couldn't express or you were dimming yourself or whatever,
Mhm.
the experience was? It's always, again, what is the safety? So again, as you said, like until you're ready, or when you know better, you do better. And just because
Mhm.
you know it does not always mean that the doing will, it takes time for that to catch up and
Yeah.
to align. So it's really having a grace and a kindness with yourself. I understand the Western world, we are a microwave society that wants to take a pill and arrive to perfection, and we have it all together, where that is a wall of suffering that you will continuously bang into and not allowing yourself to have this human experience of allowing it to be messy. Yet
Mhm.
when you have that curiosity, you can be engaged of, oh, I learned and oh, this was a mistake and I'm not going to do this. And this is a bit messy, yet how can I reorganize this so that I can move through this without cutting off the joy and the play and just feeling vibrant in your own day to day, which is work at first if you haven't explored any of this territory. Like
Yeah.
anybody that has gone to the gym in the first few weeks, there's muscles you've never engaged with before, your cardio, all these kind of things. And it's like, this sucks. And it does. Personal growth sucks for a little bit. Yet
Mhm.
once you start getting the hang and you start using certain muscles that feel counterintuitive and you switch it, it's like rewiring And instead of going outwardly as we've been programmed, you go internally to find out what is working with my energy, what's working with my biology, how am I not separating or attacking myself for the experiences that are going on. Does that
Mhm.
make sense?
Yes, as a matter of fact, if you don't mind, yesterday I'll tell you something that happened to me in this exact area. And my husband and I lived in Baltimore County for 12 years,
Oh,
and
that bridge.
we lived in Essex, which is one town over from Dundalk, where the Key Bridge dumps into on the north side. My son is adopted, and he was in Dundalk when we found him. And because we lived on the Beltway of 695, we drove when we moved in and when we left Baltimore. That's the way we took. There were times it was closed because the winds were too high, but that was just it felt like there were so many memories associated with that and the people that are there. My son's birth mother lives not far from there. I mean, just all of that. And I was on my way to a networking meeting yesterday. Oh, I guess it was yeah, it was
I
yesterday
think it was
morning.
Wednesday. Oh,
Yeah.
Tuesday.
Yes, it was Tuesday morning, so it wasn't yesterday. Yesterday I was recovering.
Yeah.
But I was on my way because I am personally growing my business more so locally with getting very involved in local networking events and the chamber and that kind of thing. And this was an entrepreneurial event where I meet good people and have really good experiences. And this is all a piece of like understanding where your body is when you say, I'm going to grow. And my husband came in as I was like making my coffee to walk out the door and said, "Look what just happened," and showed me the video. And my brain said, "I have to go now," and just shifted it over and put it in a box. And I got down there and met my friend that I was parking with, and we walked to the event. And I sat there, and because it started at 8, so about 9:15, my back started getting really tight. And my head started pounding, and my shoulders started cramping up and just like into my ears. And I would like, what is going on here? And it took me a while to figure it out. I mean, I walked through my five senses protocol because I have suffered in plenty times in the past. I've been hauled out of my office on a gurney at the University of Virginia Medical Center in the middle of a panic attack because I couldn't feel my hands or feet. So I went through my own protocols. Like I can taste my coffee, I can see this. Like if I'm sure you've taught that how you can walk through those five senses. And it wasn't until I got down to I can feel, my pants, or I can feel this chair that I realized, oh, this is my body telling me that I really need to deal with that really stressful thing. And so in order to not, I knew I couldn't stay. And I mean, fortunately, it was right at the end. And I turned to my friend who's also a coach and I said, I need to go. And she said, You don't look okay. And I said, I'm not. And I think it's because I wasn't dealing with this. And my body is telling me I have to, because I was not in a safe place to just weep. And so she gave me a big hug. I cried a minute. And by the time I got to my car, I was much better. But it took most of the day to recover from that because my body was saying, Andrea, this is a bigger deal than you think it is, and you need a safe place. So I came home and talked with my husband. And then I learned more about the situation. But trying to be in a growth space, my body was like, no, 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 we can't do this. We have to shut down. So that is a perfect example, but also knowing that being true to my core values of nobody can tell me what to think. I'm going to belong no matter what. And I'm going to be authentic in this situation meant that I could say to my friend, I'm not okay. I have to do this thing and I'm going to leave now. And she said, text me when you get to your car. So that's, I think, is a good real world example of how sometimes it can be a real challenge, but we need to honor that in ourselves. And I think part of honoring our core values helps us tap into that biology aspect, our neurosystem, a lot more readily than we can without it. And before I didn't, I mean, that was when I was carted out on a gurney, right? It's like I had no idea that my core values were being that disrupted in that job. And so I hope that's a helpful example.
Of course. It
Yeah.
gives people relatability of understanding. And, people will hear this and it's like, it took you years to understand your biology and understand your
Hmm.
core values to see, wait, these are things that are happening and I'm not going to ignore it anymore just to keep doing the worldly thing
Hmm.
of go. It's like, I got to take care of my inner home.
Yeah.
And it was a very impactful thing. Like I'm here in Canada and I heard it and I was like, oh my gosh, the amount of people that are impacted. And then it becomes the trust of all humans of like now ships are losing control and
Mm-hmm.
dismantling bridges. And so, it's all this stuff that we have to process, that it's not just easily swept away if you are really understanding your inner process and wanting to be in your body. A lot of
Yeah.
people are still stuck in their head so they can do the robot and keep moving. But when you start coming back into home, and I love that, you said community, but you changed it back to, I need a sense of belonging. Like it's the
Mhm.
belonging and that I belong within my body. It's not
Yeah.
that I need to belong externally. I need to stop separating from myself just to feel a sense of belonging with other people and put myself in spaces that I didn't even realize were draining my energy. So
Yeah.
thank you for that vulnerable explanation and real
Sure.
time of what it looks like to tap in and how long it took for you yet. And you were also in a situation that a lot of us would be like, no, 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 I can't leave this. This is part of my growth. This is
Yep.
part of finances and networking and
Mhm.
appearance too. Like I'm supposed to have it all together, where it's like, no, like my authenticity, if I don't take care of me, how
Yeah.
can I be relatable to other people? And that's what you want to bring forth. And I can hear that by you sharing that.
Sure. And I think too, for some people, they may relate to that on a like, I'm not sure I know how to deal with that yet. But one piece that I share with others, because we talked about this, we work from the outside in. All of us do. We start there. We start with checklists. We start with what am I seeing? And one of the things that I help people understand is um, people that do not act in accordance with their core values a lot of times are what I would call disempowered, right? They have, you might look at your life and say, well, how do I know? Right? Well, maybe you have responsibility with no authority. Maybe you are consistently compromising on your own self-care or your own principles and the things that upset you. You may feel stifled or unsupported. You might be bored in your job, or even in your life. You might feel alone. And for me, just that piece of belonging, it's like I can always say, I belong to me, therefore I belong, right? And so being able to say, I don't want to live by imitating other people's principles and other people's priorities. I don't want to live that way. I want to define for myself what's sustainable. That's another piece about core values is that when you talk about energy, it builds it is a renewable energy source to understand who you are, and then you get to act with authority from your own understanding. You have the ability to work in situations where you can live out your passion or your convictions, which gives you confidence to then do it some more. And so just starting from the beginning gives you just a little bit more to keep going deeper and deeper.
Yeah. And when I say energy, I know sometimes some people might be, oh, that's just a woo-woo thing. And it's like, no,
No.
there's neural energy. Your nervous system runs off of energy. So say that all of a sudden you are putting a programming of a value that you want to be this way, and then you're going and putting yourself in a situation that goes contrary to that. Your body is going to fight you and drain down the energy to
Mhm.
try to ring you in to alert you like this is not what you really want.
Mhm.
And so when people are like, oh, I'm fatigued or I'm easily angered
Yes.
or any little thing is irritating me or I just want to shut down or I'm on the social media just trying to numb or alcohol, these are all things that your body's trying to communicate to you and it's trying to show you the energy. Yet, if you're not paying attention, you're just numbing. So,
Yeah.
those, once you understand those core values, you work with your biology, not against it. Um,
And my Facebook group was a perfect example of that, right? It was called Intentional Optimists, and it was very happy, and people wanted to be in there and they invited their friends. But I found it to be nothing but a drain. And I didn't want to go on Facebook and I didn't want to go in my group. It's like, I'm supposed to be running this group. I'm supposed to want to be in there. And that was a really good example of it's something that really drained my energy. And, a lot of times people think, I did this when I first got out of college. People think that if we just work harder, at whatever we're doing, then it will get better. We'll get recognized. We will master whatever skill we haven't mastered yet. And I literally got sat down 9 months into my first job, and I was told, You have to be here," because I was showing up. I was in California. So I was showing up at, early and staying late. It was a record company, all these things. So it's like, you got to perform. And she said, "You're going to get fired if you don't because what's happening is you're getting burnt out and your attitude sucks and you're suffering." And so I had to learn to ask myself, why am I working? Which then served me well when I was working with medical residents and fellows, because they have to work many hours, but to be able to say, why are you here? Right. And core values gives you that why. Um, I also took a job that basically I promised them I would start my MBA by 6 months into the job, until I realized I don't want to do this job. I don't need to pad my resume with something that, somebody else wants me to do. I don't want to do that. I'm not interested in it. And I had to learn that I'm not my resume. And a lot of times we do that as well. But then the other piece that I got stuck in, and a lot of people get stuck in, is having this growth mindset, because that's really supposed to be a very positive thing. But if we're just, like you said, learning and learning and learning, and we don't evaluate it, and we just take all this information in and do nothing with it, then we don't have anything. We're only collecting knowledge, kind of like, what's that robot that was his thing? It was like input, input. He just wanted to collect data all the time. It's like, you gotta do something with it. Do yourself a favor and do something with it.
Do the
Um,
application. Because
yeah,
I'll see, and when my clients are like, yeah, I took a next course, I'm like, stop. You're
yeah,
avoiding doing your work. You are
yeah,
not doing the application. And the only way you get growth is in the real life, in real time, that you're going to have to face the discomfort and see and play around with things. But just gathering knowledge makes you feel like you're getting somewhere, yet it's not. It is still a separation from the reality of changing from the inside out. So I'm
yeah,
like, where's the application? And that's why I do these meditations too, to show
yeah.
like you can take these, and it was only like a minute or two. Just take those
Mhm.
pauses just to check internally and do it several times a day, so that, am I just being lured by something else, or am I really checking in and doing that critical thinking? Because
Mhm.
critical thinking on its own too is a lot of energy. It's
Yeah,
not just autopilot. Like, you're really analyzing things and seeing your core values, seeing what society is, and, finding the middle ground, not this always black and white, good
yeah.
and bad. It's like, okay, what is the whole context of it, not just one side or the other side. I want to bring you into a reflective question.
Okay.
I want to ask you to bring your awareness right now and go back to your 18-year-old self. And you have 3 words to tell your 18-year-old self to carry you through the journey to now. What would those words be?
Trust, as in trust yourself. Patience, as in it's going to take time. And hope, because it will work out.
Beautiful, beautiful. I want to thank you for, bringing your own personal information and stories and being vulnerable, so that people can see how it can relate in their own life. And I'm sure a lot of listeners now want to find out, where can I get in contact with Andrea? Because these are things that I want to start learning about, or, dip my toe into the water of something different. So can you let them know where they can find you?
Sure. I am at theintentionaloptimist.com, and I've created a special landing page for your listeners with a /LiftOneSelf. And it will give you the one-page download of starting this exercise. It's free. If you don't like my emails after that, there aren't that many, I'm not super consistent, then you can just unsubscribe, but it will give you the opportunity to get started. And if you want to do some more work, that's fine. There's ways to do that in there. I also will reply to anybody through instant messaging on either LinkedIn or Instagram. And that's, the DMs on there are fine. And it's the intentional optimist. But I also have a podcast myself called Stand Tall and Own It, where I kind of share some of this. It's almost 3 years worth of female leadership stories, and then some of the stuff that I've learned from all of the work that I've done with these ladies. And it's really exciting. So please reach out to me. I would love to hear from you. My podcast is also on YouTube, so it's easy to find. Stand tall and own it.
For the listeners, don't worry, I have you. All this stuff will be in the show notes and it will be clickable so that you don't have to be scrambling and repeating and rewinding. It will all be there so that it's easy access because Andrea has a wealth of knowledge and experience to help you pivot in your world. So thank you again for being a guest and sharing such wonderful tools and also being such a light in this world by your core values and authenticity. From you sharing that story, it really shows how you are really ensuring that that pillar of authenticity is being secure and is valued. So thank you, Andrea.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure. This was a lovely conversation.
Remember to be kind to yourself.
Mm.
Hey, you made it all the way here. I appreciate you and your time. If you found value in this conversation, please share it out. If there was somebody that popped into your mind, take action and share it out with them. It possibly may not be them that will benefit, it's that they know somebody that will benefit from listening to this conversation. So please take action and share out the podcast. You can find us on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok under LiftOneSelf. And if you want to inquire about the work that I do and the services that I provide to people, come over on my website, come into a discovery call, LiftOneSelf.com. Until next time, please remember to be kind and gentle with yourself. You matter.